The moment my sister raised her glass and called me pathetic, something inside me didn't just hurt, it broke in a way that felt permanent. I remember the exact second because everything around me slowed down, like the world wanted me to fully absorb the humiliation. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the soft music playing in the background, all of it blurred into a dull echo while her words stayed sharp and clear, cutting deeper than anything she had ever said before. That night was supposed to be my birthday celebration, but instead, it became the night my entire family showed me exactly who they really were. My name is Rachel Carter, and I had just turned 30 years old that evening. To everyone sitting in that private dining room, I was the quiet, underachieving sibling who never quite figured life out. I was the one who rented a small apartment, worked with old books, and stayed out of the spotlight while the rest of them built businesses, bought houses, and bragged about their success. That was the story they believed, and more importantly, the story they needed to believe. What they didn't know was that for the past 5 years, every bit of their so-called success had been quietly funded by me. The dinner was held at Westbrook House, one of the most expensive restaurants in Manhattan, chosen of course by my older sister Olivia. She loved places that made statements, places where she could be seen, admired, envied. The private room overlooked the glowing skyline, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a chandelier that scattered light across the polished table like tiny diamonds. I sat there surrounded by over 40 relatives, all dressed elegantly, all laughing easily, all completely unaware that the evening they were enjoying had been paid for with my money. Olivia stood at the head of the table, holding her champagne glass high, her smile wide and performative as always. She had a way of commanding attention, of turning every moment into a stage. I watched her swirl her drink, completely at ease, completely confident, as if the world existed solely to applaud her. Then she cleared her throat and tapped her glass lightly, and the room fell silent, waiting for whatever performance she had prepared. She began her toast with a bright tone, praising family, success, and milestones, but I could feel the shift coming before anyone else did. There was always a moment, a subtle change in her expression, where kindness gave way to something sharper. Then she looked directly at me, and her smile turned into something colder, something calculated. She raised her glass slightly higher and said happy birthday to our sister who still rents. And just like that, the room erupted into laughter. I felt the heat rush to my face as every eye turned toward me. My fingers tightened around my fork, and for a moment, I thought I might actually drop it. The salmon on my plate blurred as my vision wavered, and the bright chandelier above suddenly felt too intense, like it was spotlighting my humiliation for everyone to enjoy. I could hear people chuckling, whispering, some even shaking their heads, as if I were a cautionary tale rather than a person sitting right in front of them. Olivia continued, her voice smooth and confident, feeding off the reaction she had created. She talked about how I was still single, still living in a small place, still working a job that no one really understood. She made a joke about me organizing dusty old books while everyone else contributed to the real world. I quietly corrected her, explaining that I was a literary archivist, but my voice was so soft it barely registered over the laughter that followed. Around the table, relatives began adding their own comments, each one trying to outdo the last. My uncle made a remark about how every family needs someone at the bottom so others can shine brighter. My aunt laughed and nodded, as if that idea made perfect sense. Cousins chimed in, sharing their recent achievements, their investments, their businesses, all of them unknowingly describing lives that existed only because I had quietly supported them. As I sat there, listening to them celebrate themselves while tearing me down, memories began flooding my mind. I thought about the night my parents died 7 years earlier, the silence that followed, the way everything changed in an instant. Everyone believed they had left behind very little, just enough to settle affairs and close that chapter. No one knew about the investments my father had carefully built over decades, or the rare manuscripts my mother had collected, pieces of history that were worth more than anyone could imagine. The truth was hidden in a will that only I had seen in full detail. Everything had been left to me, not out of favoritism, but because my parents trusted me to handle it responsibly. They had written clear instructions, asking me to take care of the family in whatever way I thought best. At the time, I believed that meant helping them, supporting them, giving them opportunities they might not have otherwise had. I never imagined it would turn into 5 years of funding people who would eventually laugh at me for being worthless. I remembered the first time I transferred money anonymously, the hesitation I felt, the hope that it would make a difference. I helped Olivia when her business was on the verge of collapse, stepping in through an investor account so she would never know it was me. I cleared debts for relatives who would have lost everything, funded opportunities for cousins who wanted to start over, and made sure that no one in the family ever had to struggle the way my parents once did. All of it had been done quietly, carefully, without recognition, because I wanted to see who they really were when they didn't know where their support came from. I wanted to believe that kindness would come naturally, that family would mean something beyond money. But sitting there on my 30th birthday, listening to them laugh at me, I realized that my silence had only enabled their cruelty. Olivia raised her glass again, announcing another toast, this time framing me as an example of what not to become. The entire table followed her lead, glasses lifted, smiles wide, as if they were celebrating something meaningful rather than humiliating someone they were supposed to love. I didn't lift my glass. Instead, I felt something inside me finally give way, not in anger but in clarity. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, my movements calm and deliberate despite the storm inside me. While they continued laughing, I typed a short message to my lawyer, a single instruction we had prepared months in advance. Then I pressed send, knowing that everything was about to change in a way none of them could have predicted. After that, I stood up slowly, my chair scraping softly against the floor, and thanked them for the evening. My voice was steady, even though my heart was racing. Olivia made another joke, asking where I thought I was going, reminding me that I had nowhere else to be, nowhere better to go. I didn't respond to that. Instead, I simply said that the night had been enlightening, and then I walked out of the room without looking back. The next morning began with silence, a calm that felt almost surreal after the chaos of the night before. I sat in my penthouse apartment, the same place they believed was a small rented studio, sipping coffee while looking out over the city. It wasn't long before my phone started ringing, the first call coming from Olivia. I let it go and answered at first, watching as the calls piled up, one after another, until curiosity finally pushed me to pick up. Her voice was completely different from the night before, stripped of confidence, filled with panic. She demanded to know what I had done. Her words rushed and uneven as if she could barely keep up with her own thoughts. I responded calmly, asking what she meant, pretending not to understand the sudden urgency in her tone. She explained that the money had stopped, that the monthly payments she had relied on were gone without warning. She talked about trust funds, about expected income, about plans that were now falling apart in real time. I listened quietly, letting her speak, letting her reveal just how dependent she had become on something she never questioned. When she mentioned the anonymous benefactor, I feigned surprise, asking how she could have accepted such large amounts of money without ever knowing the source. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear the realization forming in her mind, piece by piece, until it finally clicked. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she asked if it had been me, and for a moment, I considered telling her the truth outright. Instead, I reminded her of who she believed I was, the version of me she had created to feel superior. I told her that someone like me could never have that kind of money, reinforcing the illusion she had clung to for so long. Then I asked her a simple question, one that cut deeper than any accusation. I asked her what she actually knew about me, not my job title, not her assumptions, but me as a person. She had no answer, and the silence that followed said more than anything she could have tried to explain. Later that day, there was a knock on my door, and when I opened it, I found not just Olivia, but several other family members standing behind her. They looked different without their usual confidence, their expressions uncertain as they stepped inside and finally saw the truth of my life. The space they had mocked turned out to be something entirely different from what they had imagined. And for the first time, they were forced to confront how wrong they had been. We talked for a long time that day, though conversation might not be the right word. It was more like a reckoning, a slow unraveling of everything they believed, everything they had taken for granted. They asked questions, tried to justify their actions, attempted to negotiate a return to the way things had been, but I made it clear that there was no going back. I told them that I wasn't taking anything away from them, that I was simply stepping aside and allowing them to face reality on their own terms. I explained that being family meant more than shared blood or financial support, that it required respect, understanding, and genuine connection. Those were things they had never given me, even when I had given them everything. Over the following months, I watched as their lives began to change. Without the financial safety net they had unknowingly relied on, they were forced to adapt, to make difficult decisions, to confront challenges they had never faced before. Some of them struggled more than others, but slowly, something shifted in the way they approached life. A few eventually reached out, not asking for money, but for something real. Conversations became less about appearances and more about understanding. Apologies came, some sincere, some less so, but I learned to recognize the difference. Not everyone stayed in my life, and I accepted that as part of the process. Olivia was the last to reach out, nearly a year later. When we finally met, there was no performance, no audience, just two people sitting across from each other, trying to rebuild something that had been broken for a long time. She spoke differently, listened more, and for the first time, seemed to see me as more than a reflection of her own success. We are not close now, not in the way people might expect, but there is something honest between us that didn't exist before. And for me, that matters more than anything money could have bought. Looking back, I realized that the night of my 30th birthday was not the worst moment of my life, even though it felt like it at the time. It was the moment everything became clear, the moment I stopped hoping for something that didn't exist and started demanding something better. They once called me pathetic because they believed I had nothing, but the truth is, I had everything that actually mattered. And now, finally, they are beginning to understand the difference.